Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in our wonderful universe. Welcome to another episode of Healing in Ways You Never Thought Possible in our Miraculous Healing Series. And since my guest was unable to attend today, I decided that I'll share my story with you. You know, each one of us has amazing healing stories, and sometimes we don't think they are that amazing, but they are. And hopefully, my story will inspire you as well. Believe it or not, I was on a pathway to become a concert clarinetist. In fact, I had no interest in going into healthcare at all. But I'm going to share a little bit about my upbringing and my childhood that'll give you a better understanding of who I am. Um, I was born an empath, intuitive, and a highly sensitive person. So I came into this existence as that. My parents really didn't know what to do with me because I felt things at a very deep level. Okay. In fact, I was probably considered a very sensitive child because everything seemed to bother me. What we know now is, in fact, is that people who are highly sensitive, they're just ultra tuned into everything and they feel things at a very deep level. So, knowing that little piece of information, I was raised in a household where feeling emotions was not considered a good thing. In fact, my mom's MO for that was ignore it, it'll go away. And sometimes when you say that to somebody who's an empath, intuitive, and a highly sensitive person, the last thing that happens is that it doesn't go away and it gets bigger. So I used to tell my mother, it's like it's not going away, it's getting bigger. So with that piece of information as well, for me to survive my childhood, I needed to channel my emotion into something creative. So, of course, that was music, and I really excelled at that. Now, add on another layer that when I was in second grade, my father ended up having to have back surgery for a ruptured disc. And that was back in the 1960s when things were in the real early stages of development of medications and procedures as to what we know today in modern medicine. And so he ended up having back surgery, and then he ended up picking up a hospital acquired infection, which back in 1966 they didn't have the medications or the technologies to, first of all, diagnose that, but to actually heal that. So my dad was in the hospital for over 2 months. We couldn't see him. What last I remembered, my vision of him in second grade was that he was this really robust man, probably about 180 pounds. And when I saw him when he came home, he was this skeleton of a man, maybe 125 pounds. He just was wasted away, and you know, he pretty much died on us when I was in second grade. And of course, having not being able to feel really added to that, because I knew that there was something really bad going on, but my mom would not address the issue and just pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. So many people, have kids and they try to sugarcoat it or not tell them the whole thing, but the kids usually can perceive the way things are, even though no words can be said. It's all in energy. That's one thing to remember. So my dad survived from that in 1966, but 4 years later in 1970, my dad got violently ill once again, was in the hospital, and he had developed abscesses throughout his abdominal cavity and needed to be in the hospital, have major surgery to clear out those abscesses. And he was pretty much on his deathbed again. And then one other thing that happened, that he did get better, but that happened 3 other times in addition to that. So from 1970 to 1975, what the heck is going on here? Jesus Christ. Anyway, so my computer's acting strange again. But anyway, so from 1970 to 1975, my dad had 4 episodes of this type of thing. And so my childhood was like an emotional roller coaster for those years. And, you figure you are an adolescent, you're trying to find yourself and you can't feel, and because you're not allowed to, and all this other stuff. It was really very challenging to survive my childhood. And so I did whatever I could to survive, and I channeled my energy into music. But it wasn't until 1975 when the 4th episode of this happened. And in 1975, we have to remember that the CAT scanner was just introduced into modern medicine as a technique to uh, diagnose and assist in diagnosing patients. And so they put my dad underneath that CAT scanner. And what they found was that where his problem was stemming from was where he had that original surgery back in 1966. And he had some type of process going on there that whenever his immune system got compromised, it would trigger and it would set into motion this whole sequela of events that had happened 4 previous times. And so the Western medicines realized that the solution for this was to have my father have a what they call a spinal fusion, which is a back surgery. But you have to remember, in 1975, it was in its neophyte stages of development. So it came with a lot of problems, meaning that it came with a high failure rate. It came with you could probably die from this, and you could probably be paralyzed from this. And of course, my mom heard all that, and she was just not, you know, I think it really frightened her. And so the other thing that she found was, believe it or not, back in 1970s, there wasn't a lot of information out there. A lot of lay people got their information from, newspapers, magazines, so on and so forth. And my mom came across this article that was in the National Enquirer of all places. And it was a featured article about a minister from Cairo, Michigan, Reverend Alex Holmes, who had the gift of laying on of hands, healing. And he was being featured in an article because he had the capability of assisting his brother in 1975 to heal from leukemia. And Reverend Holmes at that time had been doing this work for, about 25 years. So he had been doing it since the 1950s. And so my mom was all over this like bread on butter on bread. My father, not so much, him being the skeptic. He said, not unless the surgeon agrees. So it just so happened that my parents were in the hospital because my dad was in the hospital at that time. And the surgeon who was to be my dad's physician was at the nurse's station. So my mom went out to the nurse's station and announced to the doctor that I'm thinking about having a spiritual healer come in to assist my husband. Would that be okay? The surgeon was at the nurse's station, sitting down, writing, looked up at my mom, said, sure, that would be fine. So my mom figured, okay, this was the blessing from the surgeon. So she shared that information with my father, and my father agreed. And so it was pretty much a done deal. And in that, maybe 3 or 4 minutes went by, my mom went back out to the nurse's station, the same surgeon sitting there, and sharing that information, with the surgeon. She said that, my husband agreed to have the spiritual healer come in. And the surgeon said, what are you talking about? I never agreed to that. Of course, my mom didn't share that piece of information with my dad, but it just showed me that how the universe was lining things up behind the scenes in order for the next part of the story that I'm going to share with you. So a month later, Reverend Holmes was at our home in Connecticut. I grew up in New England. And my siblings, I'm one of four, and I and my two grandmothers were there sitting around the kitchen table with my father and Reverend Holmes. And I remember meeting the man, and he was just a very humble, very grounded individual. And just, you could just feel a lot of love and compassion coming from the man. And so he noticed that my father had one leg that was shorter than the other. My dad had a leg length discrepancy about an inch, and he did wear a lift in his shoes. However, I'm not sure how the Reverend knew that this was so, because my dad was barefoot and there was no shoes and no lifts or any type of devices in sight. So he did have my father put both his legs up as he was sitting down, and you could tell that there was a 1-inch gap there. Had my father lower his legs, and he said some prayers over my father. He touched his abdomen where his solar plexus was, and the top of his head where his crown chakra was, and said some prayers. And 3 minutes later he announced, okay, now put both your feet up. And so my father put both his feet up, and I kid you not, they were the same length. My father started bawling like a baby, like I've never witnessed before, because for my father, he realized that something was happening and he needed the visual response. For me, I witnessed a miracle, and I knew my life changed in that moment forever. I knew that it was no longer my life's journey to become a concert clarinetist. It was my life's work to go into healthcare, become a healthcare provider, and provide possibilities for people to heal in ways they never thought possible, to become the bridge from the physical to the spiritual, from the what you can see and what you can't see, the invisible to the visible. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. What happened with my dad, interestingly enough, he received another 30 minutes of healing from the Reverend Holmes, and he was instructed to go to bed. And he did, and he slept for over 24 hours. So what's important to know when there's massive energy healing and energy work going on with a person is sometimes everything in their energy field is getting reshuffled and revamped, and it's like a computer getting a huge download of information. And what we need to do sometimes is reboot the computer in order to start it. Sometimes when you get a lot of energy work done, you need to lie down and rest and maybe even sleep so your body could recalibrate itself to a higher vibration and frequency. And that's, I believe, happened with my father. My father returned a month later, back in 1975, to the CAT scanner, where they found no further evidence of any problem regarding his previous problems of coming in with his immune system getting compromised and then coming in with this full-blown regalia of problems. Never had to have the surgery, never had to revisit that problem the rest of his life, and he passed away about 10 years ago at the age of 80. So what I'm here to share is that healings can happen, and they could happen in many different ways, not just what we think, that A plus B equals C. I'm just inviting our audience to realize that things can happen more like a matrix. Things are interconnected in ways we have no idea, but yet once we get it dialed in and follow our intuition on things, amazing things can happen. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope this story was an inspiration to you, because I know we all have our own. And I invite you to start sharing those with other people, because you never know how your story is going to touch, influence, or impact somebody's life. And I think we all need to have some type of inspiration to these days so that we can move forward, because many of us are here to do important things on their wonderful earth. So next week, we are going to speak with Nancy Benitez. She was supposed to be on today, and I had some glitchy things happening with my programs here. And of course, Mercury just went direct from retrograde, so I'm not surprised that things are acting up. But that's just what happens sometimes. You just have to be flexible and learn how to pivot. So I want to thank everybody for coming and listening. And I really would love for people to like our YouTube channel, and it's at Dr. Fazzino, Healing in Ways You Never Thought Possible. And if you ever have problems staying in the present moment, have I got a solution for you? I offer a free meditation that's very simple. It's about 5 minutes, and it helps you ground and stay in the present moment. Because as we know, when you are in the present moment, you're right here, right now. You could feel and you could just enjoy yourself and just be. Because we need to experience more being in our world instead of doing. So I'm signing off for now. And join us next time for another episode of Healing in Ways You Never Thought Possible. Bye now.